The heat of Saqqara was a palpable thing, a physical pressure pressing down on the wide, empty plain. Imhotep, the pharaoh's chief vizier, did not feel the sun on his neck. He felt the weight of eternity, stood before the resting place of kings, the traditional mud brick mastaba, and found it wanting. It was a low, squat mound of sun-dried clay, designed to contain, not to ascend. It was mortal, built of the same dust it would eventually become. The great floodwaters claimed it, the relentless wind eroded it, and the very cycle of life consumed the material of death. Pharaoh Djoser, the living Horus, had summoned Imhotep to his inner sanctum, a room carved into cool, dark granite that mocked the desert outside. Djoser's eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were shadowed with a deep, existential demand. "Imhotep," the pharaoh stated, his voice a low rumble, "my spirit must not merely rest in the earth. My life is a bridge between the gods and this land. My death must be the stairway." The pharaoh's request was not for architecture. It was for apotheosis. It was a sacred command that placed the burden of immortality squarely upon the shoulders of one man, Imhotep, the physician, the scribe, the astronomer, and the architect. Imhotep understood that to build for Djoser was to design a functional machine for the soul's ascent. The current methods of construction, ancient and accepted, were entirely inadequate for such a cosmic task. Eternity, Imhotep realized in that moment, could not, under any circumstance, be built from temporary things. It was a simple, terrifying geometric truth that had eluded all his predecessors. He retreated not to his plans, but to the silence of the temple of Kuma, the god who molded bodies on his potter's wheel. He wrestled with the very substance of creation, the geometry of the earth, and the mathematics of the cosmos. The answer that finally presented itself was solid, unyielding, and demanded an almost reckless level of audacity: stone. Not the small chips used for foundations, but massive shaped blocks, stacked and smoothed into a structure of unimaginable scale. It's to build in stone, particularly the hard limestone that lined the opposite bank of the Nile. It's to challenge the sun, to mock the power of the wind, and to openly defy the slow, patient entropy of time itself. It was an act of architectural war. His rival Sekhem, the powerful high priest of Memphis and a custodian of the old traditions, watched Imhotep's preparations with undisguised and venomous suspicion. Sekhem represented the conservative soul of Egypt, the fear of change. "The stone belongs to the mountain, Imhotep," Sekhem declared during a tense gathering of the court, his voice dripping with condescension. "To cut the heart from the bedrock for a tomb is not honor. It is hubris. The earth god, Geb, will surely demand retribution." Imhotep met the older man's blazing gaze with calm precision. "To honor the pharaoh is to build him a star. Sekhem. Mudbrick is for the temporary houses of the living. Stone is reserved for the eternal palace of the spirit." This distinction was the essence of their deep and abiding conflict. Sekhem saw dangerous, reckless innovation. Imhotep saw divine instruction revealed through the strict discipline of mathematics. One pivotal night, Imhotep was observing the sky from the royal observatory atop the palace. He looked up at the pole star, the celestial anchor, the single unmoving point around which all the heavens perpetually turned. The stars, in their grand and silent procession, were arranged and ordered, receding steps, the celestial court ascending to the highest, purest light. This, he knew instantly, was his sacred inspiration. The design was not to be a flat, solid monument, but a colossal stairway, a monumental stacking of traditional mastabas. Each succeeding layer built slightly smaller and recessed from the last. He sketched the vision in the dust with a stick, then feverishly transferred the geometry to papyrus. He named the concept Dua Netjeru, the stairway of the gods, a physical trajectory from earth to the northern sky. When he finally presented the immense plans to Djoser, the pharaoh remained absolutely silent for a long, intimidating stretch. The scroll that unfurled before them was not a mere blueprint, but a prophecy written in mathematical precision. "The scale is impossible," Djoser finally stated, though his voice wavered slightly, betraying his awe. "The weight is too great. No man has ever commanded such a mass of granite and limestone. The stone of Aswan is a myth until it is standing here." "The sun moves across the sky every day, my pharaoh," Imhotep replied, kneeling. The great river flows tirelessly to the sea. We need only copy the immense patience of the cosmos. The gods have provided the material. We must simply invent the means. At that precise moment, Queen Imhotep, Djoser's mother, and a figure of quiet, powerful tradition and unwavering common sense entered the room. She surveyed the scroll without speaking for a full minute. Her approval was the true pivot point. If it is to stand forever, she spoke, her voice clear and soft. It must be built with the true geometry. It must be a heart built by a human hand, but beating with the rhythm of the divine order. Mat, her blessing. A silent yet profound affirmation of the spiritual correctness of the design tipped the scale definitively. Djoser nodded once, his face carved with the enormous gravity of the decision. Begin, Imhotep, he commanded. But know this: failure is not merely a loss of resources, it is heresy. It is a sacrilege against the eternity I have been promised. The command was given, and it ignited a nation. The desert floor of Saqqara was instantly transformed into a hive of frenzied, dedicated activity, a landscape aggressively scarred by unprecedented ambition. Thousands of workers, skilled artisans, and conscripted farmers gathered, bound together by the sheer exhilarating scale of the task. They were building something no human eye had ever seen. The initial work was the most grueling, extracting the pure white limestone from the quarries across the turbulent Nile. Imhotep's engineers struggled mightily against the limitations of their soft copper tools. He solved this fundamental problem by directing the workers to utilize the hardest stones they could find, specifically the black, dense dolerite, to hammer out the softer quarry rock, creating a technique of brute force mixed with geometrical planning. Transportation was the next seemingly impossible hurdle. The Nile carried the stone, but once on land, each massive, rectangular block required hundreds of men to pull on thick, frayed ropes. The men dragged the heavy sledges over, specially prepared. Meticulously oiled earth roads, the only thing preventing the wood from splintering under the immense weight of eternity. Imhotep was omnipresent on the site, walked among the exhausted workers, not as a detached overseer, but as a tireless, encouraging mind. He healed their inevitable blisters, settled their complex disputes, and shared their coarse bread and beer. He became the vital, necessary human link between the pharaoh's celestial, untouchable dream and the worker's weary, deeply earthbound reality. He made the dream achievable through physical care and logistics. Meanwhile, Sakim, the high priest, began his insidious campaign of subtle and calculated resistance. He used the laborers' superstitions as his ammunition. He spread persuasive rumors that the structure was topologically flawed, warning that its sheer, immense weight would draw down the wrath of the very earth god. Geb, his most potent threat, was that the monument's sacrilege would disrupt the annual life-giving inundation of the Nile, plunging Egypt into a terrifying drought and famine. Djoser heard the whispers and the fearful grumblings in the court. But his faith in Imhotep, once granted by his mother, was now unshakable. He only pressed Imhotep harder, demanding constant visible proof that the audacity was indeed justified. The first layer, the wide, foundational base, a massive rectangular mastaba over 200 feet wide, was finally completed. It was already, by a huge margin, the largest structure of its time. Imhotep did not allow a pause for celebration or rest. He immediately began planning the second tier, a smaller, precisely recessed layer built directly on top of the first enormous platform. This act of stacking, this intentional reduction of scale with each ascending layer, was the very essence of his sacred geometry. It was a physical, three-dimensional representation of the soul, shedding its earthly layers to reach the purity of the stars. The stones, now cut with meticulous, impossible precision, fit together like the interlocking, perfect pieces of a divine puzzle. Sheer amount of mathematics required to maintain the stability of the central core was staggering and required daily calculations. Imhotep utilized the revolutionary concept of inclined planes, vast gravity-fed ramps made of rubble and earth that constantly rose as the structure grew. These immense ramps allowed the massive blocks to be pushed and pulled up the steep sides of the pyramid in progress, making the impossible ascent a manageable mechanical feat. The entire construction site was a dynamic, living sculpture of creation, changing daily, constantly moving, yet steadily growing toward the fixed permanent point of the northern sky. Then one fateful day, tragedy nearly struck the project with devastating finality. A section of the outer casing, weakened by an unseasonal, unexpected downpour, and further compromised by Sekim's calculated removal of key support timbers, began to shear away. A terrible grinding sound, like the voice of the mountain protesting its capture, echoed across the silent, terrified site. The mechanic instantly seized the thousands of workers who dropped their tools and scattered. Imhotep, who was standing near the apex of the third layer, checking the alignment, did not hesitate for a second. He yelled commands, his voice cutting like a whip through the terror and confusion. Immediately organized the scattered workers into disciplined, efficient groups, directing the insertion of new support logs at critical pressure points. He ordered the immediate reinforcement of the failing corner with fresh, fast-setting plaster and hundreds of small stabilizing stones pushed deep into the crack. He stayed there for 12 relentless hours, exposed to the blistering afternoon sun, refusing all food and water, personally ensuring every new support was driven deep and true into the unstable core. The structure finally held, groaning but intact. The catastrophic collapse was averted by the sheer force of Imhotep's will and organizational genius. Sekim, the antagonist, watched from a safe and cynical distance, his face a silent mask of bitter disappointment, mixed with a grudging, reluctant respect for his rival. Djoser, having ridden out to the site to witness the potential disaster, saw not a fragile, terrified man fixing a flawed design, but a divine instrument restoring cosmic order. The pharaoh saw his chief advisor as a living manifestation of Thoth, the god of wisdom, who had personally placed his hand upon the structure to save it. His trust was cemented forever. Later that evening, the Queen Mother Imhotep sent Imhotep a rare ancient clay tablet engraved with the powerful eye of Wadjet. It was a silent sign of protection, gratitude, and acknowledgement of his mat. It was a gesture Imhotep valued more profoundly than any of the pharaoh's official gifts of gold or land, recognizing the queen's quiet, true power. The monument continued its inexorable climb, the fourth layer, the fifth, and then finally the sixth tier. Towering majestically above the vast, newly constructed enclosure wall that Imhotep had designed to surround the entire complex. The entire complex was conceived as a universe in miniature, with elaborate temples, vast courtyards, deceptive subterranean passages, and the Great Pit, all meticulously orbiting the central ascending axis of the step pyramid. It was the architectural realization of the Egyptian creation myth, with the pyramid acting as the primordial mound, rising from the waters of chaos. The stone was then dressed, smoothed, and polished with sheets of flawless, brilliant white Tura limestone, making the entire towering structure gleam under the ruthless Egyptian sun. It was no longer a simple, aggressive stack of gray stone. It was a blinding white beacon, a flawless, powerful statement of royal authority, faith, and the promise of eternal life. The day finally came for the final dedication ceremony. The temporary scaffolding was entirely removed, the earth ramps were systematically dismantled, and the thousands of dedicated workers stood silent on the plains. They looked up, no longer seeing the years of sweat, struggle, and pain, but the flawless, impossible, and perfect ascent of the first great stone building in the world. It was a victory not just over gravity and logistics, but over doubt, tradition, and the human belief in limitations. It shifted the boundary of what was considered possible. Pharaoh Djoser stood at the base, dressed in the powerful, sacred crown of Upper and Lower Egypt, his gaze fixed on the highest apex. He was looking at his secured future. He turned slowly to Imhotep, his eyes filled with a potent mixture of royal pride and deeply human awe. "You have not built me a tomb, Imhotep. You have constructed a magnificent ladder to the very heart of the gods." The structure was the permanent shadow of the divine geometry Imhotep had tirelessly witnessed in the stars. It was a physical manifestation of the concept of cosmic order brought to Earth. It cemented Djoser's reign and legacy, irrevocably transforming him from a simple mortal king into an immortal figure whose presence was forever etched into the bedrock of Egypt. And what of Imhotep? The man who had entered the royal service as a physician and scholar had, through the severe, unforgiving discipline of architecture, completely transcended his own mortality. He was now the master of the Great Hall, the administrator of the grand palace, the chief sculptor of the pharaoh, the high priest, and, most profoundly, the creator of the enduring artificial mountain. His name would be officially written alongside Djoser's a rare, unprecedented honor that spoke volumes of his transformation from a skilled human figure to a figure of pure legend. For all the millennia to come, his immense creation would stand, an enduring monolithic testament to the pivotal moment when a pharaoh's impossible desire met a singular man's genius. It had been the ultimate cost, the relentless, consuming, and exhausting dedication of a lifetime of study, and the ultimate gift, an immortal footprint on the surface of the earth. The step pyramid immediately became the revered prototype, the very first in a long, magnificent line of great pyramids that would come to define the entire civilization of Egypt for thousands of years. It was the pure, distilled spark of sacred geometry, the foundation upon which all later pyramid builders, like Snefru and Khufu, would stand to realize their own greater dreams. Imhotep, the man of mortals, became not just a hero, but a myth, eventually deified as a god of medicine and wisdom by later generations. The architect who built a monumental stairway to heaven eventually had his own path to the stars, an immortality secured by his own hands. It proved beyond any doubt that human genius, when rigorously guided by mathematical order and divine inspiration, could indeed reshape the physical world. His work transformed temporary faith into permanent stone, demonstrating that the limits of human construction were only the limits of human imagination. He had meticulously measured the stars, weighed the heart of the earth, and built a structure that would endure until the very desert itself eventually gave way to time. But the true, enduring secret of his sacred geometry was not merely the precise stacking of the stone. It was the relentless driving and deeply human will to believe in the possibility of forever. The monument remains the ultimate irrefutable proof of his architectural genius and his profound understanding of cosmic order. But the story of its creation, the agonizing struggle against tradition, the terrifying battle with gravity, and the triumph of the human intellect is the true, enduring legend. It is the legend of a mortal man who became the pharaoh's equal, a man who saw the sky and decided to build a road to meet it. Legendary story of Imhotep, the mortal architect who defied tradition and defined an age, and the sacred mathematics that guided his impossible, immortal dream. Thank you for joining us on this journey through ancient history and legend. Like, share, and subscribe to Storycraft Studio to uncover more myths and legends that shaped human history.